Hello. I will be reading an excerpt from Dalai Lama's Little Book of Wisdom. There are a number of qualities which are important for mental peace, but from my little experience I believe one of the most important factors is human compassion and affection, a sense of caring. Let me explain what we mean by compassion. Usually, one concept of compassion or love refers to the feeling of closeness we have with our friends and loved ones. Sometimes compassion also carries a sense of pity. This is wrong. Any love or compassion which entails looking down on the other is not genuine compassion. To be genuine, compassion must be based on respect for the other and on the realization that the other has the right to be happy and overcome suffering just as much as you. On this basis, since you can see that others are suffering, you develop a genuine sense of concern for them. As for closeness we feel towards our friends, this is more like attachment than compassion. Genuine compassion should be unbiased. If we only feel close to our friends and not our enemies, or to the countless people who are unknown to us personally, or towards whom we are indifferent, then our compassion is partial or biased. As I mentioned before, genuine compassion is based on the recognition that others have the right to happiness just like yourself, and therefore, even your enemy is a human being with the same wish for happiness as you. A sense of concern developed on this basis is what we call compassion. It extends to everyone, irrespective of whether that person's attitude towards you is hostile or friendly. One aspect of this kind of compassion is a sense of caring responsibility. When we develop that kind of motivation, our self-confidence increases automatically. This in turn reduces fear, and that serves as a basis for determination. If you are really determined right from the beginning to accomplish a difficult task, then even if you fail the first time, second time, or third time, it doesn't matter. Your aim is very clear, so you will continue to make an effort. This sort of optimistic, determined attitude is a key factor for success. Thank you.
Let's give Wesley Smith another hand. Now is all we have. This is about love. Love is in our covenant and fundamental in our principles. Love's not smiling and being courteous, although they may accompany love. I want to give you some examples of love from my life, from my own life, and extrapolate to try anyway to help to see where we can go with that. Compassion is in the now. Do you even say, I have compassion? Action is required to be compassionate and to love. Love is an action word. Action's in the now. Feeling compassionate is powerful and can be overwhelming, but it's not an expression of love unless you act in the now. What are acts of love? I'll tell you how I learned about individual acts of love. I saw love in Mr. Sickles. His son Skeets was joining Boy Scouts. Mr. Sickles asked me and two of my black friends to join Scouts since we were all childhood friends with Skeets. He took us to the First Baptist Church and got us started. When it came time for our board of review, we discovered that it was the first time the men in the church knew they had an integrated scout troop. Mr. Sickles had shown us love and his son love. That experience helped me when I went with the segregated Y to the camp in the Poconos and helped other campers set up their hammocks. A new experience for me. It wasn't a hardship, but love of a new experience. Love of the boys who were there, not from my neighborhood, and our adventure. Another example is when my mother asked me to pack up my wagon with our hand-me-down clothes. I was the fourth child. And cart them a mile across town to our friends, a family with 12 children. That was love, not charity. Children know what love is, even without calling it that. During my middle age, I was the chair of my son's scout troop in Westchester County in New York. One night, a couple came to join the troop. The wife came over to me and said, "My son likes boys." I said, "Is he willing to talk about it?" She said, "Yes." So I went over to him and I said, "I understand that you're a pedophile." He said, "Yes." I said, "You know, I have to share that with the troop committee." He said, "Yes, I know." So I went over and I talked to the troop committee. I said, "Mr. So-and-so tells me he's a pedophile, and you can see his son out there playing with the other boys. What's our job? What should we do?" And we all put our heads together and decided that we would make sure that Mr. So-and-so was not around the boys alone. And his son joined Scouts and had a great time. Sometimes it's hard to know what love is. There are solutions to bad situations, but you must be open to them. Compassion is love in action. Now is all we have. So a missed opportunity to exhibit love could become a platform to develop love. When we do not use the opportunity to develop love, we are resisting personal growth. Those who do use it are working toward being adherents of the eighth principle. Life's lessons are taught in mysterious ways. Certainly my experience joining Scouts was no less perilous for Mr. Sickles than my experience with a pedophile. Different and yet the same. Love was shown in each case. There's only now, no time to rethink it. Love is also a test. How often are we tested? Compassion is found to be needed everywhere, and you do not expect. Everywhere you don't expect. I played music for money when I was about 15. A musician sees life from all angles because you run into all kinds of people. I learned early on that hate is a human condition and that other people were rejected in America besides Black Americans. In Asbury Park, New Jersey, where I frequently played, there were gay bars and even transvestite bars. I learned how these people were being oppressed. In my second year in college, I played for a dance in Greensboro, North Carolina, consisting of 500 black men. These situations awakened me to the fact that religion and law help to make other people unaccepted in our society, besides me and other African Americans. This is what James Baldwin had to say about that. Show the video, please. Just a little technical difficulty. It's okay.
In the play.
What is wonderful is coming into the theatre and finding black people here at last, because they never come to the theatre otherwise.
Well, to tell you the truth, I've often wondered why white people come to the theatre. There's very little in the theatre to speaking to anybody.
Do you look at the play and wonder, do you want to change it? Do you feel it's relevant still?
I certainly wouldn't change it. In any case, the question is not whether it's relevant to me. It is certainly relevant to the people who have claimed it, the people who are playing it, the people who are interpreting it, who are making it theirs. I wasn't, after all, 35 years ago, there was no guarantee that I would be alive now.
So you might as well be dead, you say.
I might as well be dead, yes.
It's about blind faith. Margaret, the heroine, just takes on faith, doesn't
Well,
she?
she takes on faith as a way of avoiding something else. Many people do that. Perhaps most people do that. In order to avoid confronting love. And love involves the terrors of life, and that involves the terrors of death. And faith is, for many people, a kind of hiding place in which you won't be hurt, in which you won't have to think about yourself, and in which you won't have to change, in which you haven't got to be responsible for your neighbor.
Why do you think your father became a preacher?
My father was the son of a slave, which has something to do with it. He was a very in the play.
What is wonderful is coming into the theatre and finding
In this clip, James Baldwin says that if you don't experience the suffering of others, you won't understand your own suffering. UU's woke to this injustice. We've jumped into action and professed to this gender identity injustice. And we show our love for all humankind through action, collective action. Even so, I've been told by some LGBTQ plus individuals who have come to our services that we still have to improve on being welcoming here in the sanctuary, especially to transgender people. UUs have not solved a very old problem in their midst about race, a trumped-up category from 1691 to separate Africans from European indentured servants, so the landowners, the only voters at that time, did not have to defend themselves from all the people they mistreated. Then religion got on the same bandwagon, and together the law and religion have done a good job of keeping us apart. While in graduate school, I discovered UU. I couldn't think of a better way to describe the way my father taught me to do critical thinking. The UU theme was, to question is the answer. Nowadays, that's the fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Along with the other 7, we have a solid foundation to deal with the world as we know it today. How does this relate to our statement of love and compassion, the 8th principle? The 8th is our statement of action, with the 7 principles being our basic guidance. The 8th principle. First part says, I'm committed to working on elimination of racism in myself. How do we do that? Many people in the church exhibit love on a personal basis with many others. For the most part, when we're together, it's a loving environment. During our service, we often express love in many ways: praying, writing in the book, lighting candles, clapping, standing in appreciation, swaying back and forth, even hollering out. We consider the church a loving environment. Are there negative incidents in the church? There are still incidents of SAEs, subtle acts of expression, which we said we would all read about. But if we employ the methods of SAE response, then love is being exhibited and learning growth is taking place. This is an example of compassion or love and is welcomed through the SAE expression. Are we taking advantage of the now to show visitors and new members our love? Missed opportunities are messages to them that we all need to consider. We all come to share love. For some, it is the only place they get to feel love. Even when the message is about growth, we still feel loved because of the effort to help us grow. But visitors and newcomers may need a bit more personal love. So let us be mindful of that. And let's be mindful of SAEs with newcomers. For SAEs could make them only visit once, which would be a disaster due to a lack of love. Now is all we have. But what about the eighth principle outside the church, where it says, I'm committed to reduce racism in my institutions? There are groups in the church working to help the homeless, criminal justice, restorative justice, health, education, and other injustices. Sometimes it's about eliminating racism. Are we working to eliminate the causes of these blights on our democracy? A deeper question is, do we know the impact on people of the inequities in the law and the concomitant support of the church? Do we discuss these inequities and tease out solutions to these monumental problems in our society? Those late 17th century laws I spoke about earlier keep being updated to keep the status quo as seen through the eyes of Black Americans. The mortgage my parents had to live with for 30 years, miss a payment and you lose your house, are probably still around. But new instruments to finance housing were developed in the last couple of decades and tried out on Black people. They sold subprime mortgages to Black people who could afford prime mortgages. Their rates were much higher and there were fees, sometimes large, that prime mortgage buyers do not have to pay. They were all wrapped up in such a way that even lawyers had a hard time discovering them. It worked so well, they sold lots more to whites. Then they packaged them as commodities and sold them in the market. This scheme was led by Lehman Brothers. It almost broke the market and lots of people lost their homes. Lehman Brothers failed and ultimately went out of business. Interestingly, Lehman Brothers got started financing the purchase of slaves. And as usual, the church supported all of this. If it were not for people like Heather McGhee, who wrote The Sum of Us, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, we would not have known anything about it except for the market crash. Knowing about these things might impact our own behavior. What does that look like in action? Let us start locally. Please raise your hand. How many of you attended the Juneteenth celebration yesterday? So if you're at home, I hope you raised your hand too. Not enough of us. Please do not tell me you were in D.C. for the Poor People's Campaign. Yes, that is very important. But getting to know your neighbors, finding out how to show love to them as our covenant and the eighth principles imply, should take precedence. You should know there was a contingent of UUs in the parade yesterday. And this church had a booth where we showed books that were written by local authors, African-American authors. Some of those books are on the table back there. You might want to take a look at them on your way out. So you have an opportunity to know that there are African American authors right here who have contributed to our understanding of what life's here in Anne Arundel County. Okay. So people, when will we have an opportunity like yesterday again? As James Baldwin said, I cannot tell you who to love, but I can suggest that if we do not love our neighbors, we will have missed a great opportunity to grow our love for humanity and to grow our congregation and its local influence in the quality of life for all of us, including our neighbors. Pam Brown publishes every year Poverty Amongst Plenty about Anne Arundel County. We have real work to do to help our neighbors live the life we envision for all. It's different if they choose a different life, but it's our responsibility to improve their options. Susan Frederick Gray, president of UUA, states clearly in the spring 2022 edition of UU World that we must be about embracing an ethic of love. Living into beloved community is spiritual work. She says that the ability to grow, change, and adopt is a fundamental expression of our living tradition. James Baldwin said that when there is no love, there's no way to use your own suffering to understand other people's suffering. No way to live out your own responsibility to love one another. Look around. We have a lot of leadership and just plain work talent in UUCA. We have a wonderful experience with Habitat for Humanity. We're talking about homes on Clay Street scheduled for rehab. In fact, we're going to provide funds for them today. But I must ask, why are we not recognizing the need for better housing for the people who were rejected from downtown about 60 years ago to make way for a garage, thereby effectively abolishing a thriving black community, a community that had a hotel, a movie theater, and plenty of other businesses? Those people are warehoused in ghettos off Forest Drive, and their children go to essentially segregated schools. They lack public transportation, which was fine when they lived downtown. Is this what UUs mean when we repeat our 7 principles? As I get more deeply involved in the Blueprint for Maryland, I'm learning more how this segregated housing has affected just about every ill in our society. Lack of public transport for these communities means difficulty in all the essentials in life. These people live at the very bottom of Maslow's needs triangle. We do not have to wonder why their children do not do well in school. They lack hope because we do not ensure they have access to all the life supports we ourselves have every day. I'm focused on the fact that young mothers cannot even take advantage of the child rearing supports and the health supports for their children that the county provides, basically because they cannot get to them. Preparing their children for kindergarten is not even known to be a process because they often lack the communication capabilities we all have. These problems need to be addressed because we often work on the back end of it, particularly in prisons reform and police reform. The reason so many are in prison in the first place is because they lack hope and never learn to read. All coming out of the main problem: poor people living together without services, even getting to work is a problem. But I question how we use our acquired talent to do spiritual work. We could be leading the way to develop a large multi-income development. I mean, really multi-income, including with some of us living there. That's associated with public transportation, which would be the only viable solution to poverty in Anne Arundel County. What are we doing with our education and experience? Why are we not moving in that direction and investing in such an enterprise so we can share life with those who can benefit from the multi-income environment, so their children can know about options we had in life they never encounter? And so we ourselves can learn about compassion and have a wide range of friends who we could also learn from. In the process, our own children can learn from suffering and develop love through that experience. One house at a time is a solution, but it's not how we function in our high-powered jobs, where we think of systemic solutions. And we know that a few houses is not really a solution. Do we think about this in terms of love? Is our love not great enough? Friends, do not think I'm asking you to do this, but please ask yourself why we are not doing it. And please ask yourself, what do we mean by love when we recite our covenant? One more thing. While considering your answers, please remember that now is all we have. Blessings, and have a wonderful Father's Day, which I'm already having because 2 of my 4 children are here.